Have you lost where you're going? Hey, my dear friend, are you too tired to love again? You stormed out and took your bag so fast you left your coat. Remember the one you wore that night in Ontario? I still think about those days in the stillness of our home.
Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Luis Chavez. I'm a photographer and filmmaker based out of Southern California. And if you're familiar with my channel, you know I haven't posted a video since like August. So kind of like a quick life update of what I've been up to ever since. So my wife and I actually had our first baby back in October. So we welcomed our son. And so we've been pretty busy with, kind of taking care of him and a lot of sleepless nights and kind of a lot of firsts with our kids. So it got me thinking of all these pictures I've been taking and with the camera that I've been taking pictures with. And so I wanted to make a whole video about it. So if you're familiar with my channel, you know that I've been shooting with the Leica Q2 for over a year. So I did a first impressions video about it back in September of 2020 when my wife rented me the camera. So that was kind of like my first foray into the Leica world. So I had it for a week and I just fell in love with the Leica system, especially with the Q system. So about a month later, I actually bought it. So in October of 2020, I bought my Leica Q2. So I've had over a year of experience. And I kind of want to talk about everything that I've learned over the last year, but also kind of like the features of the camera, what you can expect if you're interested in buying the Q2, and kind of the drawbacks if you want to see if this camera is for you. The Leica Q2 is a 47 megapixel full frame fixed lens camera. So this camera has a 28mm f1.7 lens. So you can't really stitch out lenses, but that's kind of what I want to talk about, starting with this camera. So it's the design. So I really love the design. It's super minimalistic. It has minimal controls, but everything that the camera has, it's right where I think it should be. So there's a shutter speed dial here. There's a dial here that you can customize, and I usually just keep it for exposure compensation. But if you press the button at the top, you can also switch out your ISO. So it's really easy to manually change your settings, and not just on the camera, but also on the lens. So the lens has physical controls for your f-stops, or if you really want to customize or manually focus, you can also do that on the lens. So that's a big draw for the Leica, especially on this lens. So if you you actually like clicks for your f-stops, it has it right on the lens. But if you really like to manually focus, there's a button on here that you can press and it goes right into manual focus. And so if you are a shooter that typically likes to manually focus or even zone focus, if you're a faster shooter like that, you have all the options here to actually do that. So that's a big draw on this camera. It has everything that I need if I want to go full manual. But if I want to just go into full automatic mode, it's super easy to do. There's an automatic function for your f-stop, for your shutter speed, and you can set your ISO on automatic. So you can technically use this as a point and shoot, but if you like to manually shoot, you can also do that. So that's a big plus. So the Leica Q2 is also weather sealed. If you like to shoot in the rain or in the snow, or if you like to travel a lot, which I really do, you'll have the peace of mind that your camera's not going to break on you. I recently traveled to Hawaii in the summer, and this camera did really well. It only rained a couple times, but I had the peace of mind that if I wanted to take a camera with me, I could take the Leica Q2 and it wasn't going to break on me. The Leica Q2 also has a really good battery life. I always bring 2 batteries with me wherever I go, but I never even drain one. So I usually go like halfway or something. But if you're like someone who likes to shoot thousands of pictures, you might want to carry like 1 or 2. But if you're like me, who tends to shoot around 300, 400, 500 shots per session, maybe, you're good with 1 battery. So this battery lasts all day long. So if you're worried about battery life, that's not something I would be worried about, since I've gone all day without having to switch out the battery. But if you are shooting with this camera like at an event, you might want to bring a couple. So I usually bring this as like an extra camera for like my weddings. Whenever I photograph weddings, if I'm not a videographer, I bring this camera along. So this is my secondary camera. Usually I only drain one battery, but I have an extra battery just in case, and I rarely have to go to a second one. But if this is your main camera, if you're going to use it for like as a main camera, you might want to bring 2 or 3. So the battery is pretty beefy, so you get a lot of battery life with this, as I mentioned. So this is the actual battery for the Leica Q2, and if you have like an SL2 or SL2S, they share the same batteries. So yeah, it's a pretty beefy battery, so I've never had to worry about running out of battery. But if you're concerned with that, yeah, this is what it looks like. And what I really like about the Q2 and extended to like the Leica SL2S is this little lever that you get for your battery door. So it doesn't actually have a battery door, it's flush. So what you do to actually take off the battery, there's a lever here that you press, and then it doesn't actually come out right away. So this mechanism makes it so you don't drop your battery. So if you really want to, after you press the lever and you really want to take off your battery, you just have to press down on the battery and it comes out. So I really like that. I've dropped so many batteries over the years, and that's something I wish that other manufacturers would do, because it's such a simple thing, but it goes a long way. Another thing that I really love about the Leica Q2 is the EVF. I come from Sony's, so I use Sony's for my professional work. So weddings, I do a lot of videos. So Sony A7 IIIs and Sony A7S IIIs is what I typically use for wedding days. And with the A7 III, I was used to really bad EVFs, and I didn't know that they were that bad until I tried the Leica Q2. So it's like a night and day difference. It's the closest I think I could ever get to like an actual viewfinder. I mean, it's nowhere near going to a traditional viewfinder, but it's pretty darn close. It's really beautiful. It's really, really bright. And so if you really like to manual focus, like I mentioned, it's super easy with this EVF. So if you're shooting in like bright sunlight and you really want to make sure that your exposure is right and your color is right, this EVF makes it really easy to compose. So even for me who wears glasses, I've never had a time where I struggled to be able to compose with this EVF because it's so big. So yeah, the EVF is beautiful on the Leica Q2. The Leica Q2 also has image stabilization. So if you're someone who likes to shoot at night or likes to shoot like at f4 or f8, and your shutter speed has to be a little bit longer, you can actually handheld shots a lot more. So I'm comfortable hand holding shots at like 1/10 of a second, 1/5 of a second, and I'm always confident that I'm gonna get a pretty sharp shot for that. But going into not just IBIS, but also low light capabilities of the camera. So for me, grain is not that big of an issue generally. So I usually don't look into stuff like that, but I've always been very comfortable shooting like at 3200 and 6400. And even in my professional work, I'd rather have a grainy photo than a blurry photo. So even if I have to go above 6400, it never bothers me. The noise that you get with this is very grain-like, so it's not something that usually bothers me. But if you're someone who doesn't like grain or noise in your photos, I wouldn't go past 6400. And even that seems a little high for if you really like clean images. But if you don't mind a little bit of noise, a little bit of grain in your images, 6400 and above, I'm very, very comfortable shooting on. So this wouldn't be a review if I didn't mention some cons, and there are some big cons for the Leica Q2, and I think the biggest one would be price. So the Leica Q2 retails at, when I bought it, I think it went for $5,000. I got this used from B&H, so I paid like $4,200. It was in like mint condition, so I really got a great deal on it. But now with Leica, they did raise the prices of their cameras. So I think now if you're looking for a Leica Q2, I think if you are buying new, it's like $5,500. If I'm mistaken, I'll put it up on the screen what the actual price is now. But the Leica Q2 is definitely not a cheap camera, and no matter how you slice it, it's still kind of doesn't make sense for a lot of shooters because of the cost of the camera. But if you're someone who really appreciates quality, because this camera is really well built, it's, to me, is worth the price of the camera. And going into that, this lens, it's a summilux f1.7 lens at 28 millimeters. So if you're looking to buy this lens, an equivalent of it by Leica, it runs you about $6,000 or $7,000. So at $5,500 or $5,000, you're getting a camera and a body and a lens. So if you look at it that way, and based on Leica prices, you're kind of getting a deal on the body and you're getting a really beautiful lens. So another drawback of the Leica Q2, it's its weight. So the Leica Q2 is kind of a heavy camera if you want something really compact. So it's a small camera, but based on the materials that Leica used, it's pretty hefty. So if you compare it to like a X100V or from Fujifilm or a Ricoh GR3, it definitely has a lot more weight. I mean, a Ricoh GR3 is a pocket camera technically, and the X100V is a little bit smaller. But if you're kind of like in that range of like a fixed focal length camera, there's going to be a little bit heftier. So if you like to travel light, this might not be the best bet for you, especially if you don't like to carry a bag or anything like that. So if you like to carry a bag or like to put this around your shoulder, you're not going to run into a lot of issues. But again, if you like to travel light, this might not be it. Something that I've also noticed every once in a while, and it's not like a big deal for me, but I just thought I would mention it. So if you are someone who likes to use auto white balance on the camera, it doesn't always nail it. So for me, I'm a wedding photographer and videographer. So a lot of this white balance that I do it manually because I don't really trust cameras. Even if they have great white balance, I usually just like to set it myself. So I do it with my personal cameras as well. So with the Leica Q2, I usually just set it. If you're in bright sunlight, it usually nails it. But if you're like in mixed light or something like that, it doesn't always cover it. So if you like to auto white balance your images, especially if you're shooting JPEGs. If you're shooting RAW, it's not that big of an issue. You can always correct it in post. But if you like to just shoot JPEGs and just be done with the pictures, this might not be the best bet unless you're willing to manually white balance your images. So another thing to mention that's in the cons category is the dynamic range. So if you're used to like kind of like a Sony or a Canon, you know that you can retain some stuff in the highlights. But if you overexpose this camera, your picture's gone. So as a pointer, if you're interested in this camera, if you have this camera, if you want to get really good exposures, don't always trust the auto exposure. I always underexpose my images for almost a full stop, and it retains shadows really, really well. So if you keep that in mind, you'll be able to get the most out of this camera. So like I mentioned, the Leica Q2 has a 28mm f1.7 lens. So if you're like me who likes to take a lot of portraits, it really allows me to get that really nice shallow depth of field. I mean, it's not like a 50 or an 85, but it's still really nice separation. So it allows me to get those nice portraits, but also environmental portraits or landscapes, or if I'm out on a vacation, or if I'm doing street photography every once in a while. It's a very versatile focal length, and I know it's a little wider than most people would like, but for me, 28 has been like that sweet spot. I still like 35, but give me a 28mm lens and I'm still happy. And which kind of brings me to my next point. This camera being a 47-megapixel sensor, it allows you to crop into your photos. So the Leica Q2 has a really nice, really cool feature. It has a button here in the back, which allows you to pre-compose for a 35 or a 50 or an 85. So it has frame lines that it shows you what the different focal lengths will have. I mean, obviously you're not going to have the depth of field of different focal lengths, but the crop factor of them. So if you're shooting RAWs, you see what you would get when you crop them in post. But if you're shooting in JPEGs, it actually does crop in the image on the camera, so you'll be able to see it right off the bat. But yeah, it allows me to have a little more flexibility. So if for whatever reason my composition is not the best, it allows me to really go in there and kind of make it my own and see if there's a different composition that I didn't see on the day. So I know some people don't like to recompose or crop in post, but it's something I really enjoy. I really like the post-production aspect of taking pictures. So if you're like me who likes to play around with crops and colors and everything like that, you'll have a great time using this feature. But if you're someone who doesn't like to really crop, it's not something you really have to use anyway. But if you like it, it's there. So even though the camera is really, really minimal, it still has tons of features, and a lot of features that most cameras don't have. And what makes this lens really, really versatile is it also has a macro mode. And so right on the lens, you can go, you can just slide this over and it goes right into macro mode, which is super useful if you like to take pictures of things really, really close. So you can focus in a very close distance. So you like to take pictures of like flowers, or just if you like to experiment with that kind of photography, it's there. I don't do a lot of that, but it's really nice to have that option if I really want to. And it makes the whole camera really versatile. I have now owned the Leica Q2 for over a year, and I've made so many videos last year using the camera, taking thousands of photos, from street photos to client work and even most of my personal family photos. And after thousands of photos, I finally feel like I know this camera enough to be able to talk about it in depth. Over the years, I've bought and sold so many cameras from Fuji's and Sony's, and even some Canon cameras every now and then, but without fail, I would get bored or I would get frustrated with the cameras, so I would sell them and buy the next camera hoping to find something that would stick. So after a year, I've kept this camera this whole time, so I don't ever see myself selling it. And the only reason I'm making this review in the first place is because I gravitate towards this camera, but it doesn't mean that I'm trying to sell anybody this camera. This camera worked really well for me. It inspires me to go out there and shoot more photos than I normally would. So I shoot more personal photos, but also get some other different perspectives that I usually don't get. And it really inspires me to keep getting creative. So if a camera allows me to do that, it's a camera that I want to keep. So for me, it's like a Q2, but for you, it could be like an X100V or a Ricoh or even a Canon R5 or anything like that. So don't feel like I'm trying to sell you this camera, but if you're at all curious on what my experience has been, it's been great over this last year. I've had it with me everywhere I've gone, from walks down to the supermarket or walks with my family and my dog. It was even with me when my son was born. So this camera took all the photos of my son's birth. So as it is, this camera has a lot of sentimental value now. So it's not a camera that I'll ever want to get rid of. So yeah, again, I really enjoyed using this camera. I don't think I'll ever sell it unless, for whatever reason, I really need to. But yeah, if you've never tried a Leica Q2, I highly encourage you to try it. I know it's not for everybody. It's a camera that I think is special, and I think that a lot of people who are interested might have fun with it. So kind of like a bonus, I want to talk about accessories. I don't have a lot of accessories for the camera. I just bought an extra battery when I bought the camera, but I did add this thumb rest, which adds a lot to the ergonomics. I have relatively small hands, so this camera fits really well in my hand, but I wanted kind of like a little extra thing for my thumb. So I ordered this thumb rest, which is not the Leica original one. I forget from which company it is, but I'll put it in the description if I can find it. So it's really, really comfortable, and it does some light brassing. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it was originally black, and then now there's some of the paints coming off. So it's aging really, really nicely. I really like the way it looks, and it's like $130 less than the Leica branded one, and it's worked really well for me. So I don't complain too much about it. So this is something that I would recommend to someone who's looking to buy the Leica Q2. So adding a thumb rest really helps out, especially if you have bigger hands. So yeah, it really helps get a good grip of the camera. Another thing I've added to the camera is this case. I don't typically put cases on my camera, but I like to dress up my camera every once in a while if I'm taking it to a place where I'm going to put it down a lot. So I got this lens. This is the Leica branded one, but I think I got it used. So if I can find it, I'll put it in the description as well. So it doesn't really add too much weight to the camera, and it looks really nice. So it's again, I don't really like to put cases on things much, but it looks really great on this. And yeah, I would really recommend, if you like to accessorize your camera, to put a half leather case on it. So yeah, that's something that I did for my camera. So thank you so much for watching this week's video. I hope I covered everything. If I didn't, please leave your comment in the comment section below. I haven't made a video in I don't know, 4 or 5 months. So if I'm a little rusty, please excuse me. And yeah, please leave any other comments that you like for me to cover in the next video. If you have an idea of a camera that you'd like for me to cover. I know a lot of photography channels, they don't really like to talk about gear, which is understandable. Gear is not the end all be all of everything, but it's something that I really like talking about. So if you have a suggestion of something that you'd like for me to talk about, I would love to hear it. So again, thank you so much for watching this week's video. I don't know if I'll post another video this year, so if I don't, Happy New Year and Happy Holidays. So yeah, I don't like to tease videos as much anymore because I don't know when I'm going to make another one, but if I end up finding something I really want to make a video about, I'll definitely let you know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.